afternoon, and thank you for joining us on Across the Fence. I'm Jolie Whitney. On this All Hallows Eve, we've got a couple of treats for you. In a moment, we'll look at a creepy copper monument steps from the State House with a nefarious connection to the capital city's past. But first, we begin with yet another disreputable tale from Montpelier's dark side, the story of Anna Wheeler. This crime of passion involves a love triangle, a plea for insanity, and a gun. Here's Across the Fence's Caleb May.
This is Montpelier, Vermont, the nation's smallest capital. It is home to just over 8,000 people, a quiet downtown, and one of the most haunted buildings in New England.
Built in 1872 for a whopping $50,000, College Hall has recently served as the home for the Vermont College of Fine Arts. But it may not only be students walking these halls, as many reports of ghostly apparitions have emanated from that tower, which could be linked to one of the most famous murders in Vermont history, all the way back in 1897.
All reports of ghostly activity seem to point to the same person, a young woman named Anna Wheeler. I sat down with Michelle Singer, the former program assistant for the MFA in Writing program at the Vermont College of Fine Arts.
I got my office, and it was already known as Anna's Hangout. That was the nickname for the office. And the residency came in, and a student came up and put a note near the door for Anna. And I didn't open it and I didn't read it, but I was like, oh, okay, this is really something.
Anna has been the poltergeist in residence for the Vermont College of Fine Arts for years now, gaining a cult-like following in the process. Reports of her mischievous behavior ranges from knocking over books, moving furniture, and ghostly theft. Despite her popularity and namesake cafe, little was known about Anna's origin. That is, until Michelle went on the case.
Yeah, I mean, I'm an English major, right? So I love stories. And VCFA is a place like you're surrounded by people who love stories. We're in a library. I work in a place where people love stories. So I think that's really at the heart of it is I'm a lover of stories like everyone else in that building. And so I just want to know. I just can't help myself. I want to know. And so I started doing the research and looking at the families on Ancestry.com.
Anna Wheeler was just 17 years old in 1897, and yet was already involved in a bitter love triangle between her fiancé, 22-year-old Jack Wheeler, and Mildred Brewster, who was 20 years old at the time.
It just gets into this, love triangle of Mildred kind of losing it over him dating Anna, and her coming over to where Anna's staying with her cousins and having a conversation on the porch. And then they go and they leave that house. And I've walked the walk. You can go to the house where Anna was staying, and then you come up to College Street and you walk over past College Hall.
As they walked, Mildred began to implore Anna to give up Jack and recognize Mildred as Jack's true love. Steadfast in her affection, Anna refused.
Anna and Mildred made their way down College Street, this very street, on their way to Jack's house just over there on Sibley Avenue. It was shortly after passing College Hall that Mildred pulled out her hidden firearm and shot Anna in cold blood.
And she falls to the ground. And there's people in houses who can see this from their porches and from their kitchen windows. And then Mildred turns the gun on herself, the same thing behind the right ear, and pulls the trigger, and there they both are on the ground.
Anna would not survive this shooting. It is said that as she fell to the ground, the last thing she ever saw was the ever-present silhouette of the College Hall Tower. Miraculously, Mildred survives and faced an infamous trial at the Vermont State Courthouse. Using a revolutionary insanity plea, Mildred gets off on no charges and lives out her life in Seattle. However, stories seem to indicate that her spirit never left the courthouse, which she haunts to this day. Despite her best efforts, Michelle was unable to locate Jack Wheeler after the shooting. However, one thing is for certain. As long as there is a story to be told, Michelle will be hot on its tail.
Looked more closely today that she died of cancer of the stomach, which I hadn't remembered that detail. And so here I am in her office, and I would climb up the tower every once in a while and kind of sit up there, and I like to sit up there and just think about the actual story. And to me, truth is stranger than fiction. The real story was much more interesting to me than the lore of glass breaking, which, I'll take that here or there. But when I thought about these two very real people, Anna and Mildred and Jack, and what brought them to that moment and reading their story, that to me was like the most interesting and the most compelling part of it, was their actual lives and what happened that day.
Michelle Singer reminds us that behind every good ghost story are real people and a real history waiting to be uncovered. In Montpelier, I'm Caleb May with Across the Fence.
Thanks, Caleb. We've got one more story from our resident ghost hunter and spooky season correspondent. In this next segment, Caleb looks at a statue in Montpelier's Greenmont Cemetery that has a cursed reputation. Perhaps Shakespeare was right when he wrote, "There are more things in heaven and earth than dreamt of in your philosophy." Our story begins with a black sheep from a noble house. Here's Caleb with the story of Black Agnes.
The Greenmount Cemetery, founded in 1855, is an integral part of the history of Vermont's capital. Nestled within its rows of stone carvings, monoliths, and mausoleums are a few grave sites and buildings that stand above the rest in both beauty and historical intrigue. There is the Stairway to Heaven, commissioned by the Stowell family. It is a massive stone stairway, hand-carved from a boulder that seemingly leads to nowhere. Then, there is the Old Winter Vault, which was used to store bodies when the ground was too hard to have a proper burial. And most heartbreakingly is the grave of Margaret Pitkin, or Little Margaret, who died at the age of just 7. Today, visitors will place coins on her grave in order to give her gifts and well wishes in the afterlife. However, none can top the fame and notoriety of this spooky gravesite.
This is the statue known as Black Agnes, commissioned for the gravesite of a controversial Vermont public figure. But since its construction, it's been less known for its beauty, but rather its curse.
John Hubbard was known as one of the richest residents of Montpelier during the 19th century, but it wasn't because of hard work. Hubbard cheated his way into his aunt's inheritance with the stipulation to invest in the people of Montpelier, to which the inheritance was originally owed. In the end, he built a library, a park, and on the grounds of the Greenmont Cemetery, a chapel. After Hubbard's death, described by author Thea Lewis as a divine retribution for his sins, Black Agnes was erected out of copper and took the shape of Thanatos, death personified. Legend has it that the curse of Black Agnes began decades ago, when 3 teenagers sat on Black Agnes during a full moon in order to boast their courage. They left and drove home, but by the end of the week, one had shattered his leg, and the other 2 were dead. Now it is said that anyone who sits on Black Agnes's lap at midnight will be cursed. Whether or not this has any basis in truth is unknown, but this much is evident. Just the sight of her copper form was enough to discourage me from ever taking a seat on her lap. From the Greenmount Cemetery, I'm Caleb May with Across the Fence.
Join us tomorrow as we keep the spooky fun going with a visit from a historian who's researched an infamous family from Rutland County. Once the toast of the spirit world, the Eddy family conjured up a reputation for being in touch with loved ones who had, to quote Shakespeare again, shuffled off this mortal coil. Here's a preview of my conversation with Jason Smiley about the Eddy family. This was kind of a family affair. Can you tell me a little bit about how they maybe started pretty young?
Sure. Yeah, the Eddys got their start in about 1863 is when they kind of first appeared on the scene of the spiritualist movement. And they started out in Brooklyn, New York, actually. And the act that they were performing was what they called cabinet manifestations. And essentially what they would do is travel throughout the Northeast, and they would have a cabinet built and put up on a stage, and people would come and pay money to watch this performance. Now they would go into the cabinet cabinet. Usually one or two of the three, Mary, William, or Horatio, would go into the cabinet. They'd be tied up, and then instruments might be placed inside this cabinet, and then the doors would be closed, the lights would be dimmed, and no sooner would the doors be closed than the sounds of the music would come out of the box. Sometimes voices would be heard coming from within the box, and then they would open the doors back up, and the Eddies would still be tied up as they were before.
And how many people were doing it? Was it always those three?
Typically just those three. There were one or two of their other brothers and sisters. There were 11 children total, but sometimes the other children would perform, but they're not as much. It was typically those three were the kind of big three of the family.
Sure, yeah. And like you said, it was kind of a family event, so to speak, but yeah. It started with their father, is that right?
Yeah, the legend says that the father sold the children out to traveling showmen, and that he got most of the money, or their agents did. But the evidence actually shows that there's no evidence to support that the Eddies started touring and giving these exhibitions until after the father died.
So maybe he's getting a worse rap than is deserved,
exactly.
perhaps.
Yeah.
And the Eddies also conducted materializations as well as these kind of seances. What's that?
Yes, so that's where things get really interesting. So in the 1860s is when the Eddies were doing these cabinet manifestations, and in about 1872, the spirits tell the Eddies that, okay, you're not going to do these cabinet exhibitions anymore. Now you're going to have the seances or the circles at your house in Chittenden. And what they did was they had sort of an evolution of the spirit box, and what it was kind of a closet up on a stage. They had a whole room built called a circle room where people would come and watch them perform their exhibitions. Only this time what would happen is William would go into the cabinet, or this kind of closet, and no sooner would he go in, a curtain would be closed, and out would step physical manifestations of departed loved ones coming to see the audience members.
Sure, so this isn't William and maybe a wig and a shawl. This is...
Well, some people say it was William in disguise, and,
right,
and some people say maybe it was some of the other brothers and sisters who were, co-conspirators in all this, dressed in disguise. So that's the big debate.
We hope you join us tomorrow for another visit across the fence. I want to thank the ghosts and goblins who work behind the scenes here at WCAX who make our program possible. I'm Jolie Whitney. Have a good one.